It's the 20th anniversary next year for CPHI in Pingmei, China.
Happy birthday, CPHI China. See you in 2020.
Happy birthday, CPHI China!
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, CPHI China.
Happy birthday, CPHI China.
Happy anniversary to CPHI China, 20 years of celebrating innovation and success.
Congratulations on 20 years of CPHI and PMEC China.
Happy birthday to CPHI and PMEC China for its 20th anniversary. Come next year because we will party.
Thanks for joining the webinar today. I'm Andy Siu from Informa. It is my pleasure to share with you this topic, the pharmaceutical market in China. We will talk about the policy reform impact and its opportunity. In this presentation, we will cover the clinical trial landscape and trend. We will also talk about the review and approval process in China, which allowed you to accelerate the drug approval process. And we will also talk about the market access, which include the reimbursement and procurement policy in China. This is my contact information. If during this presentation you have any question and would like to follow up with us, please feel free to leave your message to me by email or WeChat. This is the QR code of my WeChat contact. All we know that the product lifecycle management is very important for a drug. Each decision that you made, right or wrong, would have a huge impact to the profitability of your products. You may have to ask, who can run the trial for me? What kind of trial should I run? And in order to launch your drugs, you may have to understand, are there any policy could help me to accelerate the review and approval process? Once the product is launched, you may want to increase your market share. So you have to understanding the reimbursement and procurement procedures in a little bit further. Last but not least, you have to closely monitor the market change. So get a better prepare and understanding who can move my cheese. This presentation is brought to you by the Informa. Basically, it's based on our existing platform, like the intelligent platform, the database. So if you are our existing clients, you may be very familiar with our data monitor healthcare, which is providing you the commercial information, like the patient-based forecast and the drug comparator analysis. And we also have the biomed checker, which help you to understanding the likelihood of approval of a drugs. We not just cover the pharma industry, we also cover the information for the medical device sector. So we have the med device checker as well. In order to help you to understanding or get better prepared for the regulatory change, we have the insight product like PaintSheet will help you to understand the latest regulatory process changes. And regarding to the generic sector, we have generic bulletin will help you to understand the changes in the market regarding to the generics and biosimilar as well. Not just about this, we also have the clinical platform like Sightline. Within Sightline, we have Trial Tool, which include the global clinical trial landscape analysis and protocol review. And regarding to the Cytro, we will help you to identify the potential PI or investigator or organization which can help you or who can help you to run the clinical trials. And in order to keep tracking the global drug market landscape changes, you may refer to our product like pharma projects. With our existing platform, like the database and insight product, we're also helping our clients with our consultation service, custom intelligence. Over 19% of our consultation service clients are top 5, over 90% of top 10 pharmaceutical company are our clients for our consultation service. And 90% of our clients are repeat business. That means they are quite satisfied with our service, right? And we not just cover the pharma industry sector, we also cover the large number of projects on the medical device. And we have global experience, which helping us to do the clinical, do the custom intelligent customized consultation service for our clients in EU, Europe, Asia Pacific, including those are market analysis for China and APAC regions as well. Now, move on to our first session about the clinical trial landscape and trend. When we are talking about clinical trial, we must understand the clinical trial authorization procedures in China. In 218, there are some adjustments. Beforehand, we have the approval, but after 218, it become a tactic permission. It also have a deadline, like 60 days. In other words, the CDE shall be deemed to have given its consent if it does not give a denial or doubting opinion within 60 days from the date of application acceptance, and the applicants may conduct the clinical trials according to the submitted plan. So, as you can imagine, the number of clinical trials in China should be increasing significantly. Let's see what is the results tell you or data tell you. Here is the data that I extracted from TrialTrol, which covered the global trial landscape. So we are in the y-axis here. We are comparing the percentage, or we are trying to calculate the percentage of trial that conduct in China. In global perspective, so we are able to see that those in global perspective, how many percentage of trials include China as one of their clinical trial location. So it could include those trials that only occur in China, or those MNCT trial include China as one of their trial location. So in 2110, less than 10% of those trials were conducted in China. In 219, over 20% of them are conducted in China, with a CAGR growth of 50%. So now move on to let's look at who are sponsoring those trials in China. Here is the results. In 2110 to 214, the top 5 industrial sponsors of clinical trials in China are in fact MNC, which in the top 5 include the Novartis, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Roche, and GSK. And from 215 to 219, the top 5 becomes the domestic pharma. In fact, in 219, over 40% of the trial were sponsored by domestic pharma, and the top 5 in top 5 actually becomes the Hengrui, Sinopharm, CSPC, Qilu, and AstraZeneca is the only remaining MNC in this top 5 list. So from this perspective, you will be able to see that the domestic pharmaceutical company are contributing significantly to the clinical trial activity in China right now. And we also see that a number of multinational clinical trials are launched in China. In fact, in 2017, there is an adjustment on the registration and administration of imported drugs, which allow the phase 1 clinical trial to be conducted simultaneously in China and overseas, and it removed the requirement that IND shall have been registered overseas or have entered the phase 2 clinical trial. So here is the result. As based on the data that we extracted from the trial show, we saw that majority of the multinational clinical trial in China are in phase 3. Perhaps from the sponsors' perspective, they would like to include China as one of as their global registration effort. So they would include the phase 3 clinical trial in China. On the other hand, we also want to know what is the most popular location for those MNCT trials in China. So here is the result. We found that in 2019, 77% of those MNCT trials in China were also launched in US. So it is very common to have MNCT trial in China, both China and US. For EU country, it is about 60%, and for South Korea, it is about 61%, and for Japan, it is about 52%, and Australia, we have 50% of those trials. Those trials in China were also launched in those particular areas. So from this analysis, you will be able to see that MNCT trial with China and US is quite popular recently. And regarding to the disease area, we may notice that 41% of those MNCT in China are oncology trials. But as you can imagine, MNCT trial may not be suitable for every disease or indications because there are many differences or unexpected many differences in the regulatory requirement, treatment guideline, or patient pool. So it will increase the difficulty of launching MNCT in different locations as well. So here is some of the solution that we could provide, which is called the trial feasibility test. In fact, we have done a large number of this kind of consultation service with our clients. We help them to identify the PI, site, accelerate the enrollment rate, and benchmarking the phase successful rate or the likelihood approval, and conduct the KOL interview to get better understanding about different requirements in different locations. So here is one of the example. In this chart, actually, I'm trying to understanding the actual enrollment rate in US and China. We will pick the oncology phase 3 trial as an example. So we base on the data from trial, we try to understand the actual average enrollment rate for those trials in US and China. And interestingly, we noticed that the differences in the enrollment rate are indication dependent. For those indications listed here, actually have a faster enrollment rate in China, and for those indications listed here, have a higher enrollment rate in US. Let's have a closer look at the pancreatic cancer. Here we can find that the enrollment rate of phase 3 pancreatic cancer trial in China is 15 times faster than those in US. And for the ALL trial, the US enrollment rate is 3 times faster than those in China. Imagine if you are trying to run a MNCT trial, a multinational clinical trial in both China and US for a phase 3 pancreatic cancer trial. What is the most important question that you have to ask? Obviously, you want to accelerate the enrollment rate in US. So are there any way that we can do this? Yes. Here is the solution. But before we tell you the solution, we have to analyze the treatment background of those PI who have done the trial in US in the past. So using Citro, we are able to identify about 1,367 investigators in US have got trial experience in the past. They have they have run a phase 3 pancreatic cancer trial in the US in the past. But if we look back to identify each of these investigators, their treatment experience, to see if they have treated any pancreatic patient in the past, we find there's a wide differences between those PI. For example, there are 1% of those investigators out of 1,367 investigators, only 1% of them have treated over 500 pancreatic cases, 500 pancreatic patients in the past 2 years. And whereas there's over about 70% of those investigators who have never treat any pancreatic patient in the past. The method that we are doing the analysis is called site engage. In general speaking, is we are trying to examine the medical claims associated with each of those investigators. And then by examining the ICD-10 code of those medical claims, we're able to identify what kind of patient did they treat in the past 2 years. And during this analysis, we noticed that about 1% of those investigators who have trial experience have actually treated more than 500 patients in the past. So obviously, if you're running the trial and partner with them to run your trial, they may have both treatment and trial experience, and they have their own treatment patient pool. So Silent Engage will help you to identify who are those 1% investigator. In addition to this, we are also able to help you to engage with them, to invite them to be your trial PI as well. So it is one of the solutions that we could provide. On the other hand, if your trial is started already, but you don't want to change the site location all over again, what kind of solution could we provide? For example, if the trial was started with the 70% of PI here, which have never treated pancreatic cancer patient in the past, and in fact, the number of investigators who have never treated any pancreatic cancer patient is huge. About 227 investigators are classified into this class, so never treated any pancreatic cancer patient in the past. So in order to accelerate their enrollment rate, we are able to use the same methodology, Site Engage, to help you to identify, are there any physician who is not doing the trial for you, but they have treated a pancreatic patient in the past. So based on the ranking, based on the data, based on the medical claims ICD-10 code examination, we identify that over 1,000 120,000 physicians who are neighborhood to the 227 investigator inch of in the total. So we are able to rank out of the 120,000 physicians who have more patient pool from their own, and then using our Sidelight Engage service to help you to engage with them, to ask them to referral additional patients to your trial. So by doing this, you are able to accelerate your ongoing trial as well. So it is the solution that we could provide. Last but not least, when we talking about the multinational clinical trial, one of the most important question that we need to ask is the differences in terms of treatment guideline or a physician's perspective. So in fact, we have done a large number of KOL interviews in the past, which is worldwide, cover China, US, EU, Japan, APAC regions. Based on our site troll, we were able to identify which KOL have a more treatment experience based on this trial experience and based on their specificity, subspecialties, and whether they were the committee member of those treatment guidelines. We can shortlist a number of KOL and then ask them some question about the trial design. For example, in this case, we may be able to ask the KOL in China and US about what is their which kind of clinical endpoint is most important to them, and whether there's a surrogate endpoint could be considered as acceptable for them. And we may also ask some other questions like the inclusion exclusion criteria, comparable arm and number of sites that is expected, and the treatment algorithm. Are there any unmet needs in the current treatment situation, methodologies? So do you think by doing this, you can design your clinical trial protocol in a more efficient and better rate as well? So let's move on to the second section. Once we finish the clinical trials, obviously we would like to get our drugs approved. So let's look at what is the review and approval process can help us to accelerate the approval timeline. Here is one. In order to talk about this, we must talk about the provisions for drug registration, which is going to be effective in July 1st, 2020. In fact, there are several chapters in these provisions, and Chapter 4 is about the review and approval procedures, which would help you to accelerate the drug approval, and which cover 4 pathway procedures. One of them is the breakthrough designation. Second one is the conditional approval. The third one here is the priority review. The fourth one here is the special review. Because of the time limit, I will only talk about the breakthrough designation and priority review. Let's move on to the breakthrough designation first. Breakthrough designation is not a new idea in U.S. A large number of drugs has been granted a breakthrough designation in the past, but it is a new idea in China. But when we are comparing the scope or criteria for getting a breakthrough designation in U.S. and China, you will be able to see that there are some similarity in terms of the scope or criteria. Both China and US are trying to support the development of those drugs for the treatment of disease or condition that are considered as serious and life-threatening. And they will also award those drugs have demonstrated substantial improvement over existing therapy. So in order to get a breakthrough designation in China, probably the most effective way is to examine from the example that in the past, to examine what kind of disease and condition would be considered as serious and life-threatening, and what kind of clinical data will be sufficient enough to show that it is a substantial improvement over existing therapy. So in order to help our clients to do this kind of analysis more effectively, our consultation service has providing to you a breakthrough destination dashboard, which help you to examine all the key information about breakthrough destination. For example, it is a one-stop shop for you to understand what kind of disease area have been granted most number of breakthrough designation. Within the same disease area, which indication is most popular? And within the same indication, you may further able to understanding which patient segment is the highest, have the highest unmet needs, and which kind of clinical trial outcome were achieved in the past. So it would become the benchmark for this patient segment's breakthrough destination. Last but not least, you may also want to know they were based on which phase of clinical trial data and then get better prepared for this. So the first three items actually is from the research and analysis perspective. But from BD's perspective, for example, if I would like to license in or develop some kind of drug that could be able to get a breakthrough destination in the future in China, we may have to reference to the actual sales value, sales forecast, and the related deal values for those assets. So here is one of the examples that I would like to share with you. So using the breakthrough destination dashboard, we are able to identify that over 117 breakthrough designation has been granted in the past by FDA on those oncology assets. So, based on oncology as the disease area, which indication is most popular? Here is the result. Non-small cell lung cancer is the most popular with 26 breakthrough designation, followed by bladder cancer, breast cancer, and AML. So for AML, we got 9 breakthrough designation have been granted in the past. So further down, we would like to have a better understanding about the patient segment that is considered to be serious and life-threatening. So here is the result. There's a long list here, but this is part of the information here. So you can see that this drug was a number of drugs were granted the breakthrough designation also for the treatment of AML. And this drug was used for the patient segment who are age over 75 years old, and it is for combination use. And the second one here, second and the third one actually is for the FLT3 mutation patients. And the fourth one here is actually for IDH1 mutation patient. So basically, looking at this, you will be able to see that although they are also getting the breakthrough destination, but they are targeting different patient segment. And for each of them, you may also refer to the trial outcome to get an understanding about what kind of benchmark did they achieve. For example, for the first drug, they achieved the OS as 19 months. So it become the benchmark for this patient segment. So if you have to design or develop a drug for the breakthrough destination in the future and design your TPP, you may want to reference to this kind of information as well. Last but not least, if you want to license in a product, you may want to reference to the actual sales. This is the chart for the drug with breakthrough destination by Roche. So you can see that which one is the blockbuster based on the actual sales value. You may also want to reference to the sales forecast here. So this is the number of drugs from with breakthrough destination, also from Roche. But this is about the sales forecast. The sales forecast we are presenting here is basically from our Biomech Checker, which is summarize the sales forecast for from those investment bank, at least 3 investment bank report, and so that you can see that which one of them actually have a increasing or decreasing sales forecast, which will help you to get a better prepare for the evaluation. And last but not least, you may also want to keep tracking the deal value or deal made on those products. For example, in this case, is the deal made on 2020. Part of them on those drug with breakthrough destination. As you can see that most of them are IO type drugs, for example, Keytruda, Yuvoy, etc. And most of them are focused on the oncology development, drug development. So as you can see the trend and you can reference to the deal value as well to make your new BD decision. Last but not least, let's move on to the priority review. Priority review is not a new idea in China, but if you look at the provision, the latest version of provision, which will become effective in July, actually you can see that they are this criteria or scope have changed significantly. But you still be able to see that government is trying to support several types of drug development. For example, for those drugs for the treatment of rare disease and for those pediatric drugs. And in terms of the timeline for the review and approval process, the typical timeline timeline is 130 days. But for those drugs which is urgently needed and approved overseas for the treatment of rare disease, the review and approval procedure could be shortened down to 70 days. So obviously, it is able to see that the policy is supporting the development of treatment for the rare disease here. If you look back in 2018, actually, the first rare disease catalog have been launched already. About 121 rare diseases were listed and encouraged the drug manufacturer to develop therapy for this kind of disease. So actually, we have done a large number of in-licensing support consultation service with our clients, which some of them are related to rare disease. We will help them to identify the assets and prioritization and do the prioritization. Here is one of the example. Because in this case, we are trying to identify some assets, in licensing assets that could launch in China very rapidly. So we focus on those drugs which have finished the efficacy trial, like phase 2 or phase 3, or even at launch stage for the treatment of rare disease. And then we take out and remove those drugs that is under development in China already or already licensed to the Chinese pharmaceutical company. And then we compile a short list which include all the information about those targets. For example, the molecular type, indication, targets, originator, market competition. Most importantly is the epidemiology, because epidemiology will tell you the ceiling of the market size, and whether the drugs has granted the breakthrough, orphan drug designation from the rest of the world, and also the clinical trial results, whether it is shown to have some proven to have efficacy or safety issues, and whether there and their sales forecast and the actual sales data. So using this, we are able to do the prioritization. So if you are our data model healthcare user, you may be very familiar with our drug comparator. Actually, in our consultation, we are using the similarity methodology, but different. We're trying to include additional criteria for the scoring. And this is one of the examples that I would like to share with you. Actually, we are trying to score the ranking or the prioritize the in-licensing assets based on different criteria. For example, the strategic fit, R&D assessment with commercial landscape, patient search strategy, and value creation. For example, in this chart, you will be able to see that a number of drugs are put in this chart. The x-axis here is the strategic fit. For example, from this perspective, you may see that the drug F, the compound, the product F, actually is more favorable as a in-licensing asset because it is considered to have to be a strategic fit for our clients, and also the target in terms of target, in terms of indication, the market that this drug enter is less competitive. But G, product G here may be considered as less favorable or not less extractive because it is not a strategic fit, and it is going to enter a highly competitive market. So by doing this, you are able to identify which drug should I license in first. Of course, we are also able to provide additional service to help you to engage with the potential drug developer or originator as well. And here, last but not least, in order to evaluate the products, the market, the licensed target, we also have to do the patient-based forecast. Our existing data modern healthcare clients should be very familiar with patient-based forecast. But for our consultation service, we not just cover the EU, Euro, US, and Japan market. We have done a large number of patient-based forecasts for APAC region as well, for China, Japan, and of course, including EU and US, etc. And based on the KOL interview, so no matter which indication or which location we are talking about, firstly, in order to do the patient-based forecast, the first step is to understand the epidemiologies, and then we will do based on the KOL interviews, we will estimate the percentage of each patient segment, and then estimate the percentage of the patient who will receive the pharmaceutical treatment. And based on the baseline patient volume, we have to do some drug-specific event adjustment. For example, if there is another generic version of drugs is going to launch in this market, we have to adjust the market share. And based on the competency, based on this similar drugs dosing and drug costs, we can calculate the annual sales values for the products. And then based on the additional information, actually we are able to calculate the NPV, or even using our biometric likelihood approval to calculate the risk-adjusted NPV for our clients as well. So come to the last section here, which is about the market access. Once the drug is approved, I want to increase the market share as far as possible. So you have to understand the reimbursement and procurement procedures here in China. So regarding to the reimbursement, we have to talk about the national reimbursement drug list. So those drugs which is listed in this drug list were covered by the National Medical Insurance Program. In general, increase in uptake is expected after the drug is listed in this drug list. There are 3 types of drugs are included in this drug list, which include the Western drugs, Chinese medicine, and negotiation drug list. So Western drugs and the Chinese medicine are considered as the regular catalog. That means they were included in the National Medical Insurance Program without further negotiation, no further price reduction. But for those new drugs that's just launched in China and relatively new, less competitive, the market is less competitive, they have or the price is relatively high, they have to enter the NRDL based on by negotiation. So in general, they will have a price reduction. For the latest version of update or of NRDL, which occurred in August of 2019, last year, 150 medicine were invited for the price renegotiation. 97 of these drugs enter the NRDL. 70 of them are new drugs. Average price reduction is about 61%, and 27 of them were renegotiated. That means this 27 drugs were in the NRDL before 2019, but they have to renegotiate and further price reduced by 26% in average in order to remain in the next round of NRDL. So this is the general situation. Now let's move on to let's look at what kind of drug were covered in this catalog. Here is the disease area for the Western drugs. As you can see, in terms of disease area, the Western for the Western drug, actually the disease area are evenly distributed. You will not be able to see that a large number of focus on or concentrate in particular disease area. But if you look at the negotiation drug list, the disease in terms of disease area, most of them actually are for the oncology drugs. So as you can imagine, most of the new drugs or most of the drugs that launched recently in China may be the oncology drugs. That is the reasons why they have to enter the NRDL through negotiation. So now let's look at the history of the negotiation scheme. Before 2013, actually the NRDL covered the basic medical coverage, so no negotiation occurred. But at 2013, there are provincial level of negotiation happened. Jiangsu has 3 drugs. Zhejiang has 15 drugs that start the negotiation, which is so-called a pilot negotiation. If you want to understand the policy change in China, you must closely monitor those policy change in provincial level at pilot level, because they will become the next protocol for the national level very soon. So if you look at the situation here, after 2013, there's another pilot negotiation occurred in national level in 2015, which include 5 drugs, and 3 drugs eventually enter NRDL by cutting the price by 9%. And 2017, it became a formal national negotiation. 33 out of 44 products were enter the NRDL eventually by reducing their price by 44%. So you can see that at 2013, we have the provincial pilot level this negotiation. In 215, we have national pilot negotiation, and 217, we have the national formal version of negotiation. In 218, it is interesting that it is also a national negotiation, but it is only focused on those oncology drugs. About 70 out of 19 products were entered the NRDL by negotiation, and the price were reduced by 7%. And 219 exactly is the example that I showed earlier. 97 out of 150 drugs enter the NRDL eventually. 70 of them are new drugs with price reduction of about 61%. So if you look at all this data and calculate the average, you will be able to see that the average negotiation successful rate is about 75%, and the price reduction is in general is 55%. By reducing the price by 55%, what is my benefit from the pharmaceutical company's perspective? Here is the data. We try to analyze the actual sales value and the sales volume of those drugs that enter the NRDL by the negotiation occurred in 2018. The 70 oncology products. Actually, we find that in the first half of 2019, actually the sales and the sales volume were increased by 20-fold and 47-fold. So although we have a price reduction, but at the same time the intake is increasing significantly. But unfortunately, some of the drug cannot enter the NRDL by renegotiation. Here is the example. In 2017, 36 products were successfully entered the NRDL by negotiation. In 2019, the latest version, the latest update, 5 of them were directly transferred to the regular catalog. 27 of them were successfully renewed. Of course, as I mentioned before, they have price reduction. But 4 of them were not renewed after the renegotiation. These are 4 of them. In fact, we can see that if these 4 drugs were not able to enter the NRDL eventually, they will have some impact to the potential substitution or potential competitor in the market. So let's look at the impact for the market or industry here. Actually, I would take the AstraZeneca's Faslodex as an example. Here is the result. Here is the negotiation power of both hands from AstraZeneca's perspective and from the NRDL perspective. So it is from the AstraZeneca's perspective. It has proven that Faslodex is needed in China. Why? Because in 218, when they are in the NRDL, they have a strong sale in China. So from patient's perspective, this is a drug that they need. And from physician's perspective, this drug were recommended by the Cisco treatment guideline already. So obviously, it is a good drug. But from the other hand, NRDL would always would like to examine whether there are any other potential substitution. So here is one of the example here. In fact, in 2019, actually, the National Health Commission has already published the encouraged generic drug catalog, which include a list of generic drugs, which means that the government is encourage the manufacturer to manufacture the generic version of those drugs. And interestingly, Faslodex is one of them. So obviously, from government's perspective, they are looking forward to have generic version of Faslodex. And when we look back, when we closely monitor the development status of those domestic farmer, you may be able to see that Jingdai Tianqing has already manufactured or developed the generic version of the Faslodex and get it approved in US, both US and EU. And Haosan is also another domestic pharmaceutical company in China who have developed the generic version of Faslodex in China. So from this perspective, you will be able to see that in order to win in this kind or to get it prepared for this kind of negotiation, you have to get a better understanding about all the favorable and unfavorable factors for your company. For example, for this drug or other drugs, a favorable factor may include clinical advantages, whether the drug is listed in the treatment guideline, whether it is innovative and have some unique features. And from the in favors perspective, you may also have to better understanding about whether there are some generic competition coming and whether there are some kind of substitution. We notice that there's a lot because there are some policy changes. We can foresee that a large number of innovative or drug with good clinical advantage will be able to import to China or developed by the domestic pharmaceutical company. They may be considered as a substitution for those drugs that are already in the listed in the NRDL. So we have to closely monitor those changes. And because of time limit, we don't have time to talk about the PD-1 and PD-L1. But as you may know that actually, there's a large number of PD-1 and PD-L1 were launched in China. So whether they would like to, or what is the motivation for them to enter the NRDL, could be affected by several factors. For example, the market that the PD-1 and PD-L1 is targeting. For example, if it is targeting a very niche market, by entering the NRDL may not be able to increase their market share significantly. In this case, they may not have a high motivation to enter the NRDL. For those drugs who have, in addition to NRDL, actually a large number of pharmaceutical companies are also providing the patient assistance program to help them, the patient. So all this factor may also affect the outcome of the negotiation. So if you would like to get a better prepare for the next round of negotiation, our consultation service will help you to keep tracking all those favorable and unfavorable factors that relate to you. Now, come to the second part of this second part of the market access, which is also very important, is the volume-based procurement. This is the statistic for one of the drugs that, as an example, which is used for the treatment of an infectious disease. So in the past, there's about over 570 drug registration approval has been approved in China. In other words, there's a large number of generic are approved in China. But the price of all patent drugs were still very high because the branded drugs could win more hospital tender with their quality assurance. So the government is trying to trying to encourage or pushing the generic manufacturer to actively forward with the generic quality consistent evaluation, because only those generic drugs pass the GQCE and the branded drug could be eligible to enter the next round of national level volume-based procurement. So it become a motivation for the generic company to go for the evaluation GQCE. In terms of data that we show here, example we show here, we start with 517 registration approval. Only 6 of them pass the GQCE when the time do the analysis, and 4 of them win at the latest round of VBP. So from this perspective, you may be able to see that there is a consolidation happening in the generic industry and manufacturer industry in China. On the other hand, you may also be able to see that would be a huge impact to those branded drugs, because there are a number of generic manufacturers would be able to compete with you at the national VBP level. So here is the example, a history of the VBP occurred in the past 2 years, actually, several years, actually. So if we start with the 4+7 city to the national level, so we start with 11 province and city first. And then because the result is quite good, so it extends to other 25 city and province. And the latest version, latest one, VBP actually occur at national level. And in terms of the type of drugs, we start with the oral solid form, and then the latest one we include one of the injectable. We can foresee that for the next round of VBP, more injectable may be included for the next round of volume-based procurement. So if we want to keep checking what's happen next, we have to closely monitor those announcements made by the government as well. So let's look at the data outcome of this the latest round of VBP. The chart here showing here actually is plot against the baseline procurement volume for the first year. So as you can see from this chart, you will be able to see that based on the procurement volume, the Acabo actually is the blockbuster because in terms of the baseline first year procurement, it is the largest one. So a large number of media actually is trying to understand or foresee or are trying to understand the outcome of these drugs after this round of BBP. Last but not least, if you look at the chart here, actually you will be able to see that out of the 33 drugs that call for VBP application, 25 of them actually have their branded drug launched in China already, which include GSK, Bayer, and Pfizer, which each of them got 3 drugs in this list. So theoretically, those MNC actually able to compete in this round of VBP. But eventually, only several of MNC are able to get a piece of the market share from this round of VBP, which we've had the name showed in the bar chart here. So as you can see, just a few of them able to get a piece of the cake. So why does it happen? So let's using the blockbuster here, the Acabo, as an example to illustrate further. So in this round of VBP, actually, there are 2 successful bidder. The first one here is Bayer, and the second one is Luye. As you can see that they have different, they are using a different bidding price. Bayer is the lowest one, so it is classified as the top successful bidder. And Luye is slightly higher, is higher than the bidding price given by Bayer. So as you can see, it is also successful, but it is considered as the second successful bidder. And because there's only 2 successful bidder for these drugs, so they are not going to share 100% of the first year procurement that I shown you in the past in the bar chart. Actually, they can only be able to capture about 60% of the market share procurement volume and continue for 2 years. So the procurement volume is 60% and the procurement cycle is 2 years. But the Bayer and Luye is not going to share the market volume one by one. They have to share the market based on their selection of supply area. As the first top successful bidder, Bayer is able to choose the supply location first. So if you look at the baseline procurement volume, actually you can see according to Acabo, actually most of the procurement volume is concentrated in Beijing. So from Bayer's perspective, obviously it have to choose Beijing as the supply area first. So by doing this, we are able to identify what is the selection, what is the supply area for Bayer and Luye. So from this perspective, you will be able to see that there's a several factor will affect the final market share of those competitor after this round of VBP, including the number of successful bidder, which affect the total percentage of procurement volume you will cover and the procurement cycle. And in addition to this, it would obviously is the bidding price. The higher is the bidding price, the higher is the value of the market share. And the selection of the supply area would also affect the final market share changes. So here is the outcome, and here is the result. Before the VBP, actually, Bayer is the market leader. It have about 60% of the market share, which by providing the tablet. And Huadong actually is having 30% of the market share, also providing the tablet. Luye is having a 44% of the market share by providing the capsule form of the Cabo. But after the VBP, based on the based on the data that we obtained earlier, the market share from by Bayer is become 35%, and Luye is increasing from 4% to 41%. As I mentioned before, Luye and Bayer is only able to capture about 60% of the procurement volume in this round of VBP. There are another 40% of the remaining market share would be would not be covered in this round of VBP. But if we assume that the remaining 40% of the market volume would be priced at the buyers bidding price, actually it would contribute about 24% of the market share in terms of the market value. So from this perspective, you can see that after this round of VBP, no matter in terms of the market size or the market share, there is a huge significant changes. So in fact, we do notice that a large number of companies are trying to do a strategic change or trying to get better prepared for the next round of VBP. So there's also the service or the consultation service that we are providing to our client to serve that purpose in terms of globalization and the innovation strategies. First, look at the VBP. We may be able to identify the potential drug that could be selected for the next round of VBP based on whether the originated drugs has been launched in China and the number of generics that pass the evaluation, and whether the drug is listed in the essential medicine list or the NRDL. In terms of the price difference, are there major significant differences between the originator drugs and the generics, which may motivate the government to list this drug in the next round of the VBP, and the dosage form. And last but not least, we may help you to closely monitor those policy changes or the volume-based procurement that is occurring in the provincial level, so that you can get better prepared understanding about or expecting what will happen in the next round of national level VBP. Last but not least, we noticed that a large number of generic companies in China is also looking for the opportunity for 505(b)(2). In fact, it is quite obviously there's a large number of drugs has been approved by 505(b)(2) pathway in U.S. in the past. Based on our analysis, about 55 drugs were approved by this pathway in FDA, and we can use this as a selection criteria to identify the potential target for in licensing. For example, we may include some of the special drug delivery technology. For example, in this case is oral film, and we can also see if they can get benefit from the policy that we changes that we mentioned earlier to identify those drugs who have approved by 505(b)(2) pathway and also have the breakthrough designation or orphan drug designation in the past. So by doing this, we are able to identify a list of drugs who should be considered or further considered for the next round of new licensing opportunity. For those companies who would like to develop their own 505(b)(2) type drugs, they may also want to prioritize the indication. So if they are a developer for a particular drug delivery technology, for example, in this case is a oral film, they may want to understand what kind of indication could get a benefit from this new technology, and we may do the TPP assessment, and we may also understand help you to tracking what kind of preclinical and clinical data is needed for registration and approval. And this is a typical TPP evaluation that we did for our clients. We will interview the KOL by asking them the treatment guideline that they're using nowadays and the satisfaction level on the current treatment. If it is not satisfied, what is the unmet need? Are there any TPP attribute we will be able to solve those problems? And if this drug is able to be developed as a TPP design, how many percentage of the patient will be using this drug, which affect the valuation of your drug eventually. And in terms of market access, we will also would like to ask the KOL about the pricing range of this kind of product in this market, in this particular countries, etc. So this will help you to better develop a drug for the 505(b)(2) pathway. Last but not least, we have done a KOL interview for a generic manufacturer, global generic manufacturer. In this example, they are trying to understand, in this case, they are trying to understand the procurement volume and tendering criteria for the EU market. So we are helping them to interview the hospital head of purchase, country pharmacy, drug and therapeutics committee member, and the health insurance managers to get a better understanding about the current procurement and tendering policy and what is the expected change in the futures, and what is the most important criteria from them, and then ranking the importance from their perspective for different countries. So by doing this, you can get a better prepare for and have a better strategic planning for your market access. And last but not least, we noticed that a large number of companies is trying to do more innovative development. They will look into those early stage innovative project in more details. In fact, we have done a global research funding ground tracking service for a Japanese company. They were trying. We were trying to understanding what kind of research funding were funded by the government in different areas, in different countries. So we cover a large number of funding as listed here, and we maybe by doing this, we are able to identify what is the next big thing. What kind of technology is most valuable from different countries' perspective, and maybe able to identify who are the potential collaborators for my research, and identify some of the early stage assets, so that we can collaborate with them in the early stage of the development. Last but not least is to go aboard. In order to decide where to go and when to go, we have to design. We have to use a patient-based forecast method to do the valuation. And in fact, it is a service that we provide to our clients, which who are interested to launch their product. In addition to China, they also want to see whether there are or any other opportunity in other APEC regions like Indonesia, South Korea, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, etc. So we try to do the patient-based forecast analysis for the same product for different countries, and then help them to evaluate which market have the most valuable prospect for this product. And come to the conclusion section. I hope that by the end of this presentation, you will be able to understand that the regulatory reform actually is encourage the innovation development. For example, you can get a breakthrough designation. You can get your drug enter the national reimbursement drug list to increase the market share and accelerate both the clinical trial and the approval process, and increase the accessibility of the drug to different kind of patient through the price negotiation, and go for globalization through collaboration or multinational clinical trials. And hopefully you will be considering our Informa as one of your partner for your product development for all this aspect. And this is the end of my presentation, and this is the contact information for me. If you have any further question about the content that we cover here and would like to follow up with us, please feel free to contact us by the telephone number or email, or WeChat contact information here. And this is my pleasure to sharing this kind of information with you further. And thank you very much. Goodbye.